Coming up on this edition of the Next Man Up podcast, the Indians, are they going to change their name? If so, what are they going to change it to? We get into that. We'll talk NBA bubble ball and David Njoku. Really? You're asking for a trade? Come on, man. And welcome to the Press Play Podcast Network. Next, what the heck is our name? I forget. Next Man Up? Is that what it is? That's it. Yeah, Next Man Up podcast. It's been a while since we did one of these. Dennis Maniloff and Chase Smith, our executive producers. So good to be back with you guys as we continue to battle through these unprecedented times in our lives with COVID-19 still wreaking havoc, the Black Lives Matter movement, social injustice throughout this country. So it's good to get back with you guys and talk some sports, even though some of it will be COVID-19 related. But guys, the Indians are back. And D-Man, the hot topic, I thought it might be, okay, is this going to be the last year for Frankie Lindor in an Indians uniform? Is this pitching staff going to be, the one that's built best for a 60-game season? But Dennis Maniloff, the Indians created the topic by talking about a possible name change. How surprised were you that it came from the tribe, 2 days later than, or I should say 2 days after the Redskins announced that they were talking about a name change?
Yeah, I guess mildly surprised, Roadman, that Friday 4-paragraph statement where they said they were going to look into it. And, of course, you and I know, we've been around long enough to know when you put out a statement like that, you're not just looking into it. You're going to make the change. They're not putting that genie back in the bottle. They're not going to come back a month from now and say, you know what, after careful consideration, we're deciding to ride with the Indians. I think they might have wanted to, and I know, you might accuse me of being conspiratorial here, but they might have wanted to get out ahead of the real truth of the matter about the origin of the Indians' name, because for the longest time, we were taught in our media guide school that the Indians were named after Louis Sockalexis, the Penobscot Indian from Old Town, Maine, who played for the Cleveland Spiders in the late 19th century. The reality is that, yeah, maybe the Indians were inspired by Sockalexis to a degree when they were renamed from the Naps in 1915, the Naps being the final year in 14. But most of it was done by sports writers in consultation with the Summers ownership, Charles Summers. And most of it had to do with, capitalizing on the popularity of the Boston Braves miracle comeback in 1914. And also, some other things that are not necessarily, pleasant to talk about, shall we say. So bottom line is the origin of Indians with this franchise is not squeaky clean. It is also not directly tied to Louis Sockalexis. It is not a tribute, or at least it wasn't directly a tribute to the Indians, the Native Americans. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if the Indians were trying to get out ahead of this, knowing that these questions were going to come again, because they have come over time. We know that the protests got a lot of publicity for the logo, the Wahoo logo, but mixed in amongst that protest was a protest about the name as well, opening day and, playoffs and various things like that. So, I think it was a step that the Indians felt like they needed to make so that they didn't have to answer a whole lot of questions down the road.
D-Man, I was surprised at the timing of it. But then again, when you have Dan Snyder and the Redskins finally looking like they're going to change their name, the Indians reacted shortly after they did. But I haven't heard anything from the Atlanta Braves, the Florida State Seminoles, right? Some of the other nicknames that, are based on Native Americans. So I look at this, and the Dolans have always been proactive, with some things, not all things, but some things. and I see this as what maybe an opportunity for them to try and set a good precedent in Major League Baseball and in sports if they do indeed change the name. So you believe this you said the genie's not going back in the bottle. You don't think that they brought this up so they could have discussions about it, maybe with Native Americans, to find out if they do feel that Indians is offensive to them, and if they get feedback from them that is positive, then that allows them to keep the Indian nickname?
I think that the die's already cast, because here's the thing, and this is a position that I have had a shift on since my last radio show, which was last Sunday.
Okay.
The more I thought about it, the more I realized that over time, I think the Cleveland Indians organization has had more than enough input from Native Americans, both locally and nationally, about their name. In other words, they didn't have to start now. It's not like they suddenly say, well, we're going to consider changing the name. Let's start from scratch, from zero data collection, and let's go find, Native American individuals or tribes and see what they think. I think they've already got a file, if you will, a digital file or a compilation of what various Native Americans have thought about this name, certainly locally. And the reports that have come out since the Friday 4-paragraph drop have been that local Indians groups, local Indian groups, local Native American groups are in favor of a change. And therefore, I think that information was already known by the Indians organization, and therefore they have no problem going ahead and making the change. Of course, we know, that's at least some, if not the majority of the reason why Daniel Snyder did it was because of FedEx.
Right, money.
His big sponsor saying, hey, we want out of this. You better make a change or else. But in the case of the Indians, I don't know that any sponsors, such as, I think of Progressive or whatnot, those types of sponsors, were putting any pressure on them. I just think that they, like you said, were trying. I would say, if I can invent the term, semi-proactive.
Okay.
Because, the reality is they've known this for years. They know what the origin of the Indians name to their franchise is. They know what cartoon ran the next day in the Plain Dealer when the announcement was made. They know what's in it. So to tell me to say that they were entirely proactive and should be patted on the back for this, I'm not going to go that far. But clearly they're intent on making a change.
All right, so what have you heard that you liked? Because we did a couple of shows. What's the new nickname? What's the most popular one out there that you've heard, or maybe you have a personal nickname that you would like if indeed the Indians are no longer going to be called the Indians? What would you like to hear them called?
Well, my wife is within earshot as she listens to the show, and she is a huge fan of Guardians.
Okay.
The guy who is on the Hope Memorial Bridge, that Guardian. So I am all in on Guardians, and if I promote any other name, I probably don't have.
Well, then she's not going to like to hear this. I think it's ridiculous, and that's at the bottom of my list. I am not a Guardians fan in any way, shape, or form. I'll give it this. It's original. Nobody else has it. I don't want a retread, D-Man. I don't want the Spiders. I don't want, even the Buckeyes from the Negro Leagues, right? I don't want a retread name. I want something new. I want something creative. So I'll at least give the Guardians of, a percentage point or two that it's never been used before, at least to my knowledge, in sports, okay? What about callers or tweeters or text messages that you got? Were there any from friends or listeners that also piqued your interest, or no?
Yeah, it's really been Guardians, Spiders, Cleveland Baseball Club, as Chase mentioned, nicknameless, really. Let me think. There's another one that I'm forgetting. The Commodores have been mentioned. The tie to Oliver Hazard Perry and Lake Erie. The Cleveland Sailors, I've heard that, although I don't know that has much traction. There's one other one that has been out there that seems to be garnering some degree of popularity, but I don't remember it offhand.
All right, let me give you a few then.
What's that?
Right, I'm going to give you a few from the Kenny and JT show. Tell me if any of these pique your interest or if you've heard these, all right?
Right, but before you do, though, I agree with you about the Spiders and the Buckeyes. Spiders, why do you have to rename, bring back the name of a National League team in the late 19th century?
Yeah.
And also the Buckeyes, I mean, not only the Cleveland Buckeyes, but the Ohio State Buckeyes. Too much confusion there for me. I don't think you need Buckeyes.
All right, how about this one? As we were trying to tie things in from Ohio to a possible name, Ohio could end up becoming a state where you're allowed to wager on games. We've got casinos throughout the state of Ohio. What about the Cleveland Gamblers? You call them the Gamblers with all the casinos and the possibility of sports books. And think about the money the Dolans could pocket from, inking a deal with MGM, which is now the Northfield Park one, I think. So the Gamblers was thrown out to us. I like this one personally. Me, in honor of the 95 Indians. What were the Indians known for in 95, D-Man? Walk-off magic, right? And home runs. They hit a lot of what? Dingers. What about the Cleveland Dingers in honor of the 1995 Indians with Manny Ramirez, Jim Thome, Sandy Alomar, Albert Bell? The Dingers, man. You could have some fun with that nickname. Or what about this one? My partner, JT, came up with this. I didn't know. Do you know what the Goodyear blimp, what the original name of the blimp is or what a blimp is called? I didn't know this.
Zeppelin?
Yeah. What about the Zeps? In honor of the Goodyear blimp, the Zeppelins, all right? You have the short, version of that, the Zeps. So that one was discussed in honor of the Cleveland Orchestra, right, which is number one in the world. And back when, after the Great Depression, Cleveland turned it around, and there was a lot of train movement in and out of the state, in and out of Cleveland to bring in product and everything. The guys that were in charge of the trains and the guys that are in charge of the orchestra. The conductors. What about the Cleveland Conductors? That's another one that was brought up out there. And then this is my personal favorite. In honor of, let's see, you've got office buildings downtown, so many different businesses downtown, the medical field in Ohio, especially near Cleveland, with Cleveland Clinic, university hospitals. Professionals are working all over the place. In high school, you're an amateur. In college, you're an amateur. But in Major League Baseball, you're a what about the Cleveland Professionals, and you call them the Cleveland Pros? Any of those excite you or get any consideration from you?
Anything that comes from Roadman and JT is definitely worth chewing on. I like the alliteration part of it that comes with what was your one with the C? The Cleveland Conductors.
Yeah, the Conductors.
I like the alliteration, Conductors, Commodores off of Cleveland. But I mean, listen, a lot of them are interesting. But here's the thing. You pretty much guarantee that the Indians ownership, baseball ownership, is not going to turn to the fans for help. Not that they don't like the fans, not that the organization doesn't like the fans. It's just that there has to be a lot that goes into this, and you have to have a lot of ability to make money. You have to make sure 5 times over that you're not going to offend somebody down the line. You have to make sure that you are not going to have any sort of copyright infringement in any way, shape, or form with anybody's name, likeness, or what have you. So I think that this decision will, the Indians will say, hey, we want to hear from you, the fans. But the reality is they're going to make the call. And my sense is, if they want to play it really safe, they can go to nature and do something with insects or bugs other than spiders, bugs or birds or animals of some sort. But
the midges. What about the midges in honor of Fausto Carmona and Java Chamberlain? That you talking insects? And how about this one?
It doesn't exactly exude ferocity, but
I'm joking with that one.
Yeah, I know. You want to have something with some teeth to it, but bottom line is they're going to be very careful about how they, what they pick, because it's got to be bulletproof, as it were, when it comes to any sort of backlash or any sort of copyright or trademark.
What about the fact that 7 or 8 presidents came from the state of Ohio, the Cleveland presidents, and then you have the alternate jersey that just says POTUS across the front? What about that possibility, D-Man? That's another one. I forgot to give you that one. The Cleveland presidents.
Well, that's the thing. And then you go up against Washington, the Washington Nationals in their president's race. And by the way, what are they going to do with the president's race? But, yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would necessarily go the Ohio route as much as I would the Northeast Ohio Cleveland route. Like, I've always felt like the Iron Men, the Cleveland Iron Men for iron ore, that would be, we know Central Catholic up here in Cleveland, it's the Iron Men, but I think they'll probably stick to something more regional than state, but they also have to get the approval of MLB. I mean, MLB is going to have to cycle this through and go, all right, how many nicknames are close to this in our not nicknames, names are close to this in our league, and we'll see about that.
All right, D-Man. So how soon do you think this happens?
Well, initially I thought it could take an off season, but I've read and watched some reports where it could take a while. Okay. So I'm guessing no later than 2022 is the new team name. Possibly, long shot possibility 2021 that they turn it around inside of 6-7 months. But the reason I'm backing off that is because these reports that I've read and heard, not only do you have to get all of the marketing and all the licensing and everything up and running and all the design and all the logo, all that stuff is brand new now, but you have to remove all of the Indians references to all of your material. So it's not just adding a new name, it's subtracting your original name. So that takes time. I mean, the Indians' name is everywhere, certainly where the ballpark is concerned, but in a lot of other areas, that's going to take some time. So I would say, I would lean on the conservative estimate side and say that by 2022, it'll be a new name.
I think because of COVID and what we're dealing with now and so much that's going on in our country and that, I think the earliest is 2022. For me, maybe 2023 if they want to get this right and do all the things you just mentioned, as well as navigate through COVID-19. And let's go there because we've got baseball today's, as we're taping this, it's July 8th. So we're 2 weeks away basically from baseball starting, hopefully, in 2020 with a 60-game season, 40 within the AL Central, 20 in the NL Central. I'm not a big fan of Rob Manfred, the commissioner of Major League Baseball. In fact, I think he's an idiot the way he handled the Astros situation and that he wasn't more on top of this situation, waiting this long to get something done. But we do have baseball, and the Indians are back at it, practicing at Progressive Field. Summer camp is what they're calling it. Your thoughts on this abbreviated season and the Indians' chances, if the games are indeed played, of getting to the playoffs and winning a World Series for the first time since 1948?
Yeah, so many layers to this since we last spoke, Roadman. First of all, I just want to reiterate how disgusted I am with the owners and the players for a failure to come to an agreement on a truncated season. Granted, the situation, COVID-19 pandemic, was a very difficult one in which to deal. It provided a very sort of an ominous backdrop to the proceedings, but still, there was absolutely no excuse that the owners and the players should not have. They should have come to an agreement, and it should not have been a commissioner-imposed season. And if they would have come to an agreement in decent time, we would already be talking about baseball. The season would be at least 100 games, maybe 90 to 100 games, maybe as many as 110. But because they dilly-dallied and spit in each other's faces for so long, we get this 60-game, again, I got to pick my words carefully here, this commissioner-imposed season. So I just want to get it out of the way how disgusted I was by the negotiations and the failure to come to a deal. Now, would I rather have baseball than not? Yes. So therefore, I have to begrudgingly say, okay, I'm excited about a 60-game season that was imposed by the commissioner, because I guess I have too much of a love for the game. I also do some, pre and post game Indian shows for WTAM. So I would be cutting off my nose to spite my face if I said, hey, this is all junk. I hate it. Then, I would be disingenuous if I'm doing any sort of game coverage. So I'm glad they're at least playing, or at least going to try to get there. I mean, it feels like the way that, the COVID numbers are ramping up again, feels like every day that they're in summer camp or spring training 2.0 is like the equivalent of 6 months. It seems like the regular season's going to start in about 10 years, when in reality, as you said on the calendar, it's only a couple of weeks. What I've said from the beginning, I'll say again today, and that is, I recognize that in various cities that house major league teams, many of the cities, if not all of them, have seen spikes in cases in COVID over the last couple of weeks. Yes, that is bad, but if I'm the MLB, just as I am the NBA or another, if I'm a business, a restaurant, or a business in an office tower, I've got to try. I've got to try to go. It's not being insensitive. It's not being tone deaf. If you go ahead and you try to conduct your business, there are many businesses, many corporations, many outfits that are working during a global pandemic. We don't call those businesses tone deaf because they're conducting business while there are spikes in COVID. So to me, MLB creates its bubble, tries the best it possibly can to insulate itself from the outside world, and then tries its best to play. There should be no guilt there. In other words, what I'm saying is, don't overreact to high positive tests and say, well, because there's high positive tests in 27 of the 30 cities in Major League Baseball, we're not going to do it. No, go ahead and try. The times when I would shut it down would be, number one, if hospitals are overrun in the cities in which you are in. Number two, if the death rate, God forbid, spikes. And number three, if you have an outbreak of cases within your bubble. If there are so many positive tests on X number of teams that it's just not feasible to play. Anything short of that, I say continue to move forward and try to get this done.
You say a bubble for baseball, but there really isn't a bubble like there is for the NBA. If what I understand is correct, when you're in Cleveland with the Indians, you're staying at home. So your kids, your wife, any of the relatives you have living with you, right? They've got to, if you're going to live with them, they've got to be careful with what they do. Whereas in the NBA, they are literally in a bubble. And what are the odds? Let's say there was a bubble. What are the odds that all the players are going to adhere to the guidelines? Franmil Reyes went to a party over 4th of July weekend without a mask, and they had to quarantine him off for a couple of days, and he was finally allowed back in, cleared by the medical team to come back and, take practice, batting practice, and that. today. So what are the odds that all of these players, 30 on the roster to begin with, 60 during summer camp or spring training 2.0, like you said, what are the odds that every one of these players is going to adhere to the guidelines? And it only takes one to infect the next one. It's like that old shampoo commercial, and they tell two friends, and then they tell two friends, and so on and so on and so on. What are the odds that these players are going to be able to all stay in line and adhere to the guidelines set by the CDC, Major League Baseball, or the team that they play for?
Yeah, you're right, Roadman. I would say the odds aren't great. I mean, they don't feel great. I wish that MLB would have listened to me. Not that my opinion matters, but my proposal for an MLB start of a 2020 season, once they restarted spring training, was that they do create hubs, and that there will be no more than 8 cities involved in Major League Baseball 2020. I was advocating for 4 hubs of 2 cities each. The ones that I was advocating included Cleveland, Cincinnati, Minnesota, Milwaukee, Houston, Arlington, Phoenix, San Diego, Phoenix, Colorado, potentially. But the point is that you would have 30 teams contained in 8 cities instead of 30 cities. And I think you open yourselves up for what you just talked about, the increased odds that something is going to go haywire and guys are going to come down with the positive test. But we are, here we are. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it now. I felt like if the owners and the players put their egos aside, they could have resolved this thing about, 2 months ago. And in that span, they could have been able to come up with hub setups, and they would have been able to keep it much more tightly wound and have a much more secure bubble, relatively speaking, than they do now. But what are you going to do? The negotiations broke down. They dragged it out. They got up against the clock just to have a 60-game season. They had to squish everything together. So there was no way they were going to create hub cities anymore because they hadn't gotten to an agreement until, just recently. So I hear you. It could be bad. What happens when if and when a team has 15 to 20 positive cases? How does that what's the protocol for that? I don't know. But
it's going to happen, D-Man, right? I mean, the Buckeyes, we just found out today, the Buckeyes have shut down their workouts with their 7 sports that were allowed to work out because of so many positive COVID, tests coming back. The Ivy League's not playing any fall sports. You told me as we were getting ready to come on, Oberlin and Case Western locally have said no to the fall sports. Of all the sports, I would think baseball would be the one you could have a season, right? Social distancing, the players only 9 on a field and they're spaced out, pretty much. If there's one that you could play, and we're seeing it with, where is it? In Japan, right? Japan and
Korea.
where else?
Korea,
right? They're so far, they're continuing. So to me, baseball was the one that should have been playing all along. And that's why I think Rob Manfred is an idiot, because even though they were negotiating back and forth and they couldn't come to an agreement, there still should have been a better plan in place for when they did come to an agreement. And that's what concerns me about this. But like you said, okay, forget about that. It's over. It's done with. We have baseball hopefully coming up on the 24th at Progressive Field when the Royals come to town to take on the Indians. Let's say, D-Man, I'm way off base. There aren't as many cases. This season goes through 60 games. What say you about, and that's an old Michael Regaiism right there, what say you about the chances of the Wahoo Warriors in the Central Division?
Oh, I like the Indians' chances a lot, just as much, if not a little more so, than I like the Twins' chances. And you know me, I've been a White Sox honk for a while, and I still believe they're going to be heard from. But they're young and they're unproven. The 60-game setup, the sprint to the finish, if you will, it'll be interesting how the White Sox do, because a young team like that that's been told how much talent it has, knows how much talent it has, if it gets off to a slow start and they're sitting there going, okay, well, we're running out of time already, Yeah. But if a team like the White Sox, young and hungry, gets off to a hot start, then they don't know any better, and they get on a roll, and next thing you know, the season's over. Or next thing you know, it's a pennant race. So I think the first 10 to 15 games could tell the tale for the Chicago White Sox. If the White Sox are good in those 10 to 15 games, I think you have a 3-team race. If they're not good, I think you have a 2-team race between the Indians and the Twins. Twins, better lineup, top to bottom. In my mind, there's no doubt about it. The Indians would challenge me on that. But I believe the Twins have a better lineup top to bottom, especially when you've added someone along the lines of Josh Donaldson. But the Indians have the edge in the rotation, a decisive edge. So, edge makes it sound like it's thin. So, advantage, decisive advantage in the rotation and, in the overall pitching staff. So, it'll be fascinating there. And both, obviously the Twins are the defending division champ, even though the Indians had won it 3 years previous to that. So 2 teams that know how to win. They have veterans, they have youngsters, they have power, they have speed. But again, the Indians pitching, front end starting pitching and depth is better than Minnesota's. So I'll give the Indians the edge there. But as I said, in the Central, it wouldn't surprise me at all if the White Sox are there at the end. Now, I wanted to say, the Indians have an advantage. They don't have to play the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Tampa Bay Rays, the Houston Astros, the Los Angeles Angels, the Texas Rangers. But guess what? The other teams in the division don't have to do it either. So it's not like the Indians have an advantage because every team is playing the exact same teams.
I did see, though, somewhere on social media, they broke down strength of schedule based on last year's records, and the Indians have the second or third easiest schedule based on last year's records, which maybe helps them because they were a 93-win team that didn't make the playoffs. So the White Sox, even though they gave the Indians fits last year, the White Sox have to play a 93-win team, and the Indians, I don't know how many games the White Sox won last year, but a lot less than.
Yeah, they won. Well, the White Sox won the season series against the Indians. That's the one thing that makes me nervous. The White Sox do not fear the Indians at all when they play them head-to-head.
Yeah, so hopefully that comes to fruition and is an advantage for the Indians, along, like you said, with their pitching staff. I think it comes down to, the middle of the lineup. And for me, that's Frankie Lindor, Jose Ramirez, Carlos Santana, and Franmil Reyes. He may be the most important Indian for me because I think I know what I'm getting from Frankie, right? Probably know what I'm going to get from Carlos. He had an outstanding year last year, so anything close to that is good. Jose Ramirez and Franmil Reyes, to me, are the keys offensively for this team. And Reyes, has the potential to hit, a ton of home runs. Now, in 60 games, how many will that be? I think 20 might win the home run crown this year in a 60-game season. We'll see. But Jose Ramirez, the good thing, D-Man, is we're not starting off in March and April and even early May when it's cold outside, right? Jose tends to heat up as the months get warmer. Well, here we are at the end of July and August. It was 92 degrees in lovely Medina, Ohio today. So hopefully that will be a benefit for the Indians' bats to heat up in a hurry because, like you said, with the White Sox, if they get off to a hot start, then they could be trouble. Well, the Indians, if they get off to a cold start, and we know they're a second-half team under Terry Francona in his 6-7 years, whatever it's been now with the Indians, they can't wait any longer. And I heard Terry say this, we've got to treat this like we're tied for first, and it's July 24th, and the race is on, and it's a sprint, and it's not a marathon. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. D-Man, let's transition over to the NBA real quick.
Well, before we do, Roman, let me quickly say this about MLB ballparks and stadia. I don't know if you saw this, Roadman, or heard this, but the crowd noise that was being pumped into Progressive Field during their workout, it's fascinating how loud it was, and you wonder, based on what MLB allows each individual venue to do, you wonder if they play it loud enough, if they're allowed to play it loud enough, how much these players are actually going to feel like they're playing in some sort of desert or playing in a vacuum, as opposed to if you can pump in the crowd noise constantly, maybe, there isn't as much of an adjustment. And by the way, not just for the Indians, for every team. Maybe every team at home is going to feel a lot more like normal if you're allowed to do a lot with the PA systems.
Yeah, I don't know if they're using, and maybe you can help me on this, D-Man. Are they using their own ballpark noise that they recorded from seasons past, or is this from a video game? Do you know where this?
That's a great question, and that MLB probably has to allow them to do certain noises, certain sounds, like we think of John Adams with the Indians and the drum.
Right. Exactly.
I would assume the Indians in a home game would be allowed to play the drum if they so desire.
If they had recorded it. Yeah. So I'm wondering, are they going to make it standard for everybody so it's not an advantage, just that it's noise, to make it seem like there's somebody in the stadium? That'll be something that maybe we'll find out more as we get closer to the start of the season. What about the NBA bubble in Orlando? I'm calling it bubble ball, D-Man. Disney World. They've got the teams that are there battling for the final few playoff spots, and then they're going to get into the postseason after 8 regular season games. I'm telling you right now, to me, this season and the way it's set up now is set up for LeBron James to win an NBA championship with the Lakers because of mental and physical advantages with LeBron James. As he's getting up there in age, he's only got so many shots at it. And I think mentally he'll be more mentally tough than a lot of the other players around the league. And have you seen him? He is still in phenomenal shape. Now, will that change with the food they're feeding them inside the bubble? Because I don't know if he's allowed to bring his own personal chef or not, But dude looks like he's about 24 years old. It's amazing the shape that he is in. And I think he realizes in this abbreviated season with, so many, strange things happening, that this is an opportunity for him. No Steph Curry, no Draymond Green, no Splash Brothers with Klay Thompson. His biggest adversary, Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers. I think whoever wins the LA battle in the Western Conference wins the NBA championship, and I'm not betting against one of my good friends, LeBron James.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm really excited. I'm excited about the NBA. First of all, I'm glad that they restarted. I'm glad when any pro team is committed to a restart. Secondly, as you just heard me talk about with baseball, I've advocated the bubble concept for the hub city concept for every sport if it's going to restart or start, period. And so the NBA going to one location, I had advocated Las Vegas. I heard that it came down to Vegas or Orlando. Okay, as long as they feel like they can seal it off as best they can, they increase their odds. As you talked about the word odds, I think they've increased their odds dramatically of being able to withstand the COVID-19 outbreak and limit the number of cases. But conversely, in the NBA, all it takes is a couple of superstars to get it.
Yeah,
you can wreck a team. Whereas in MLB, of course, it would be bad if Lindor or Ramirez got it, but you have more players, and therefore you can absorb more positive tests just by doing the math, as you can with an NBA team, which has a finite number of guys. And then, of course, as we know, it's a star-driven league more so than baseball, because in baseball, even the greatest player only gets to bat once every 9 times. In the NBA, the greatest player can have the ball in his hands every time down the floor. So it's possible that the NBA season gets derailed, but I really can't wait to see it. I love the multi-court concept. I love the fact that there's going to be, 5 to 7 games a day potentially. I really like the AAU, evoking memories of AAU for these guys. I think it's going to be cool when they take the court and they just say, okay, it's mano-a-mano, let's go. It's as if we're in the backyard or in the AAU court or on the pavement playing each other. Let's have at it. And that's kind of neat, in my opinion. And so I can't wait. I agree with you about the Battle of LA. I would like to think that one of those two teams is going to come out of the West. I wouldn't guarantee that the Bucks come out of the East, even though, they had the best record at the time of the shutdown, because I think that teams around them are just good enough to cause a problem, such as the Celtics, such as the Sixers. Who knows? Maybe even the Toronto Raptors, despite the fact that they had lost Kawhi to the Clippers. They're still annoying if you're trying to get past them. So and I'm sure I'm leaving out a couple of teams here. There's one in particular. The Miami Heat is dangerous to me. So it should be a fascinating deal. I'll be tuning in to as many of these games as humanly possible, both NBA and MLB. And I'll say this, too, about the NBA. They will have played more games in the regular season than they did in that strike-shortened year. Was it how many years ago when San Antonio wound up winning it?
Right.
I think they played 50 games total. So, to me, there's no asterisk involved at all with the NBA. Maybe you can debate an asterisk with MLB, but not in the NBA. You've played enough regular season games to establish 1 through 8 in the seedings. You're going to play enough playoff games to get a legitimate representative from your conference, and you will play enough games in the finals to name a legitimate champion. So there will be no, in my opinion, there should be no asterisk or second guessing about the champion of this season.
Yeah, I'm with you. Whoever wins the championship, and if it were Cleveland, it wouldn't matter. You wouldn't even be concerned if there were an asterisk, right? You wouldn't care. It's another championship. So whoever wins it's going to win the NBA championship. I just hope, again, I go back to what I said about the baseball players, D-Man. In basketball, you only have 15 to worry about, right? You've got 15 players if you have a full roster, and then however many coaches, whatever it is. I think it's up to, 35 or 38 people per organization or something like that. That's a lot less than Major League Baseball. So less to worry about, and you're inside the bubble. Now, once the playoffs get started, families are allowed to come in, and that's where it could get dicey. But I think LeBron is going to do everything he can to adhere to the guidelines, because he realizes this is a golden opportunity for him to get another championship, to pick up number 4 and win one with 3 different teams. So I think he's going to flex his muscles both on the court and off the court in that locker room to make sure those players don't step out of line and don't drift away from the guidelines, and they preach to them that they have a golden chance to win an NBA championship. So I'm like you, going to be watching very closely to see if they can get through the season, and then if indeed LeBron brings home another title.
Right, and the good news for the NBA is that even though there is going to be close contact when games are played, much more instances of close contact, obviously, than in a baseball game.
Yeah.
The good news for the NBA is that you're going to be lopping off teams in relatively short order. Once the regular season wraps,
yep.
You'll be down to 16. And then, obviously, teams that are eliminated from the playoffs, they're gone as well. So the bubble will shrink as you go. It's not like you're having to sustain 22 teams all the way through.
Exactly. Great point there. D-Man, what about the Brownies? They made some news the last few days. Jedrick Wills Jr., 4 years, $19.5 million contract signed, $11 million signing bonus, guaranteed money right there. Olivier Vernon restructuring his contract to stay with the Browns, and the Browns get some extra cap space, if you will. And David Njoku with Drew Rosenhaus now as his agent, demanding a trade out of Cleveland. Take your pick on any one of those 3 involving the Browns.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm still trying to wrap my brain around Patrick Mahomes' deal with the Chiefs. The Bake Show took notice. He's like, you know what? I better get going in 2020 if I want to get something close to that coin. But Of the three, I think the most laughable is David Njoku. Yeah. And while I'm laughing, I'm also angry because, to me, if I'm the Cleveland Browns, I know that front offices have to deal with agents all the time, and they can't get in the business of alienating agents and talking tough to them, because then, a couple months down the road or a year down the road, here comes another client of this guy, and you really want to sign him, or you want him as a free agent or whatnot, and the agent says, remember what you did to me, way back when? Well, guess what? I'm holding it against you. So you don't want to get into an antagonist relationship with agents. That said, David Njoku has absolutely zero leverage. None. Zero. He has none. So if I'm the Browns, I politely tell Rosenhaus, hey, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but we want to keep David Njoku. We're a new coaching staff. We want to see what he can do under us. We want to see what he can do under Kevin Stefanski, a guy who likes tight ends. And so if your guy will come into camp with a smile on his face and compete and stay healthy, given the attrition rate of the NFL and given the importance that we're placing on the tight end position, you're probably going to come away from 2020 pleasantly surprised with how much production your client gets. But we're not trading him for a bucket of balls. We're not trading him for a jugs gun. We want to see if he can realize the potential that originally accompanied him into the league. And to me, when a guy who is coming off a 0 season suddenly says, I want to demand, I'm demanding a trade. If I'm the Browns, I'm like, you could demand all you want, but you're playing for us in 2020.
D-Man, isn't this deja vu all over again? Duke Johnson changing agents, going to Drew Rosenhaus, asking for a trade and eventually getting a trade. David Njoku getting a new agent, going to Drew Rosenhaus and demanding a trade. I mean, we're seeing this happen again. And
but Kenny, there's a difference.
What?
The difference is Duke Johnson had some stuff on his resume. Njoku, yes, he a couple of years ago made some nice plays, did some nice things, but on balance, the resume that Duke Johnson took into the trade demand was a lot meatier than the resume that Njoku's taking into the trade demand.
All right, let me play devil's advocate. I'm Drew Rosenhaus. Come on, my guy last year was in the doghouse with a coach that you all shouldn't have hired, and it was the laughing stock of the NFL. Don't hold, what happened last year against my client. Go back to the previous year when he had 56 grabs for over 600 yards and 4 touchdowns. This is a guy that, deserves a shot to be the number 1 tight end. And what did you do to show him how much you love him? You signed a free agent tight end to the richest tight end contract in the NFL. Oh, and you drafted a tight end and you signed another free agent tight end as well. So to us, it looks like you really don't want us. So why not grant us this, trade wish and at least get something in return for this guy? Because it's obvious you really don't want this guy and you don't think he's going to be part of your future.
My counter is, number one, the first half of your statement, Mr. Rosenhaus, is exactly why we want to keep David Njoku, because we recognize that he was in the doghouse. We recognize that he didn't have a chance to do what he's capable of doing. Not absolving him of all of it. I mean, I'm sure Njoku contributed to some of it too. It's not all on Kitchens and his coaching staff, but you're making our point for us when you say that 2 years previous he had a decent campaign. Yeah, we think that's what we can get out of Njoku. And the second half of your point is well taken. It's stipulated that we did get Hooper and we do have a crowded tight end room, but we say to David, hey, get in there and compete, show what you can do. Show your athleticism, improve your hands, improve your blocking, and guess what? If you do all those things and you stay healthy, You are going to get your numbers in a Kevin Stefanski system.
With all due
Stefanski
respect,
loves his
Mr.
tight
Barry.
ends.
All right. With all due respect, Mr. Barry and Mr. Stefanski, you know, I know there ain't enough footballs to go around to keep everybody happy. OBJ's going to bitch and moan. Jarvis Landry's going to bitch and moan. You've got Kareem Hunt coming out of the backfield. Hooper didn't sign with you guys to be a blocking tight end. So you're right. You made my point for me. That room is crowded. So why not get us out of here, get something that you can use for the future, and let David go, play with somebody who really wants him, because you know and I know you're not going to pick up the 5th year on his contract after this season. The 4th-round draft pick of the tight end is proving that point for me. So I see where Rosenhaus and Njoku are coming from, D-Man. I agree with you. It is somewhat it angers me that, somebody who has a total of 9 touchdowns in 3 years, can demand a trade. But that's the business side of the look at Raheem Mostert. He's asking for a trade now from the San Francisco 49ers after having one big year, and he's disappointed he's not getting paid. I get the business side of it. I really do. But me personally, if I'm the Browns, if I can get a 2nd or a 3rd-round pick, and I know that's probably not realistic, but maybe there's a team out there that is just in dire straits for a tight end. I heard Dallas might be interested. We'll see if any injuries occur. If I can get a 2nd-round pick for him, he was a late 1st-round pick, right? So if I get a 2nd, 3rd, maybe even a 4th-round pick, if I am not going, D-Man, if I'm not going to keep David Njoku after this year, why not get something for him, right? I mean, if I'm not going to pick up year 5 of that rookie contract, if I know in the back of my mind I'm going to cut him after this year, and Hooper and is it Harrison Bryant or Bryant Harrison? I always forget the kid they drafted. Harrison Bryant. Okay, he's more of their future than Njoku is. So if I can get any draft pick for him, if I'm the Browns, I have to seriously consider that if I'm just going to let him walk at the end of 4 years.
Yeah, I guess I'll meet you halfway, Roadman. I don't know that it's a fait accompli that he's automatically gone if he stays with the Browns after this season, because what if David Njoku does play lights out and does improve his hands and his blocking, and all of a sudden Kevin Stefanski, who, as far as I know, has never coached Alex Hooper, right? I mean, yeah. I'm sorry, is it Austin Hooper?
Austin Hooper.
I mean, he hasn't coached any of these tight ends that I know of. Maybe I'm missing something, but bottom line is one of them could get hurt, or one of them that maybe they thought was going to be good doesn't pan out. And the next thing you know, you're looking up and you're going, wow, the best tight end this year was David Njoku. Why should we get rid of him? That's a possibility. But here's the other thing I want to say to you about the Rosenhaus situation. I think you and I know there's no way they get a 2 for him. There's absolutely no chance that he's going to fetch a number 2.
I agree.
If I'm the Browns, I don't settle for anything less than a 3. So the 4 is out of it. 4 is out. Anything below 4 is out. What I would say to the Rosenhaus, and I know this is kind of a sort of a unusual way to do it, I'd say, okay, Drew, you know what? We want to have a working relationship with you going forward. We know you're a powerful agent. We're not trying to tick you off in this case. But if you can go find a team that is willing to give us a 3rd-round pick for David Njoku, we will listen.
Okay.
You go find the team. We're not itching to deal them. Therefore, we're not going to be the ones making the calls. If you've got relationships with other teams and you tell them, hey, I'd like to see and I don't know if that's tampering or not. I think an agent's allowed to talk about a player on another team to another team if
given permission. Yeah, if given permission by a team, I think you are allowed to explore those options.
Why not? If I'm the Browns, I say, Drew, go ahead. Go find a team that's willing to give us a 3. If you do that, then we'll listen. If you don't, then we're keeping them.
Yeah. Again, it's frustrating to see, but it happens in every city. San Francisco, Kyrie Irving, and Cleveland, David Njoku, Duke Johnson, and it just so happens that Drew Rosenhaus in a couple of those situations ends up being that agent, and that's what he's noted for, keeping his clients happy and getting them the most money and best opportunities he can get. D-Man, before we get out of here today, just curious, how are you handling this pandemic and this quarantine and everything? Because I'm still doing my shows from home. JT is in Canton, Ohio. Sometimes once or twice a week, he goes into the station at 1480 WHBC and will do his portion of the show. I'm doing it from home with my telos here. And you know what? I don't know what day is what. I don't know what the difference between a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I've lost track of the days of the week and everything like that. I'm so excited for baseball, for football to hopefully take place, for the NBA to take place. But there's something deep down in my brain that says I don't think we're going to see football. Baseball, yeah. Basketball, okay, because it's the playoffs pretty much. But football, and I go back to J.C. Treader when he said, look, it's a contact virus, and we play a contact sport, and there's contact on every play. I just don't see how football is going to be played. I'm hoping that the other ones we mentioned, and hockey too, with their hub cities in Edmonton and Toronto, I'm hoping we get at least those sports before football season.
Yeah, and there's no getting around it, Roadman. There's a lot that can get your dauber down these days, and I felt like this country had a handle on balance on the COVID situation. The cases, positive cases, were down. We were trending down, and then all of a sudden, the George Floyd protests hit in combination with a lot of people getting out and reopening, and I think that was a perfect storm or imperfect storm to create a lot of possibility for spreading the virus again. And now we're back, it seems like, to square one, and there's the gloom and doom that's setting back in, and mask mandates in various counties, including Cuyahoga. I mean, my wife and I and stepson went to the sporting goods store tonight to get my stepson a bat for a tournament he's going to be in, and you have to wear the masks as soon as you leave the car and go into the store, and everybody's got them. So it's difficult, and I agree. I think football, I mean, the NFL has lived a charmed life, though. Here's the thing. The NFL has lived a charmed life in the calendar year 2020 because the virus just happens to hit when they're in the off season.
Right.
And they didn't have to really adjust a whole lot. I mean, yeah, they did a virtual draft, but it did beaucoup numbers. It was one of the, most viewed cable enterprises in terms of sports. So far, the NFL has been able to tiptoe through this. But as you say, pulling off a season when there's a potential for an even more intense second wave, I don't even want to let my mind go there, and yet I do, because like you say, it's all a blur. It's a day-to-day operation. I do have the good fortune of being able to go to WTAM and do my shows from the studio, so I'm lucky about that. But it's really a day-to-day thing.
Yeah, for me, D-Man, I'm a germaphobe to start with, and then this hits, and I was kind of out in front of it before, with the masks and everything, and that this thing would grow as it has, as we're at 500,000 deaths, or excuse me, 500,000, 500,000 deaths in the world right now. I don't understand why people have a problem with wearing the mask if it's going to help. The bars reopening, and I've seen some, that everybody thinks it's not everybody. A lot of people and younger people think it's gone, and it's not. It's still the virus hasn't changed. It's still there. What's changed is the amount of people in the reopening of states going out and not respecting the virus, if that's a way to say it, in my opinion. So along with the protests that you mentioned, the reopening of things, yes, I understand we got to get back to work, but just use common sense. I mean, just common sense. Yeah, it's not the easiest thing. It's not the most comfortable thing. But if a mask is going to help save lives, help stop the spread, then just do it. I mean, I saw Frankie Lindor riding his bike to the stadium today, and he was on his bike and he had a mask. You know what I mean? So I just that part bothers me. That people aren't willing to do that. They're selfish. And then you got those idiot kids in Alabama having COVID parties, somebody there has COVID-19 and, hey, come on in, whoever, gets it first wins the pot. I mean, that's just, buffoonery.
Disgusting.
Yeah, it really is. So, respect the virus, think of others and not just yourself, because you could be a carrier not knowing it. And the elderly, the older people, and I'm 56, I'm up there, so, we may have a lesser or a worse outcome than you if you're younger. So that's my whole thing on it, why it bothers me and it concerns me. But the Ivy League was the first to do it. They've shut it all down. So we'll see if anybody follows like when the NBA did it, D-Man. They were the first with Rudy Gobert to shut it down. And I hope the bubble works. I hope we get baseball, basketball, and hockey, and we'll see what happens with football.
I agree, Roadman. Well said.
All right, D-Man, always a pleasure catching up with you on these Next Man Up podcasts. Be well, you and the family, and we'll do this again soon, all right?
You too. Thank you, Roadman. And thank you, Chase.
Yeah, another edition of the Next Man Up podcast in the books, thanks to our outstanding executive producer, Chase Smith and D-Man. I'm Kenny Rhoda. We'll talk to you next time.